Hi there. I'm going to talk today about a slightly different way of composing to the kind of standard get the sequencer up and running. And this was really just a kind of free form, sit and work out some nice chords, write down some fragments of ideas, and then try and sort it into a coherent piece. And so this is a demo which I wrote for the Eric Whitacre Choir Library. Originally, I thought I was going to orchestrate this. I always thought I was going to kind of add lots of other textures into it. But once I actually started getting the harmonies up and feeling the clashes and things like that, I just kind of thought I wanted to leave it a cappella, so that you can hear all of the kind of texture in the chord changes. So the first thing I did was I got a piano sound up. I just kind of started feeling around some kind of interesting textures. When I came up with something interesting, I wrote it down. So you can see the first kind of idea here. And then I thought, right, that sounds great. And then I was still messing around and I came up with this, which is great as well. Another little idea. And basically I filled these 2 pages with this variety of ideas. The thing we've got here. Oops, slightly different. And then I do struggle sometimes to keep things in my head. So what sometimes happens is I'll end up going kind of, or I'll think of a nice chord, and then I'll kind of go, right, remember CGA, 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 while I'm holding down the other hand. So that's how I kind of get stuff sketched down sometimes. If it's, it can prove a little bit tricky to, especially if you've got quite a complex thing. I don't want to work out, in the flow, I don't want to sit and try and work out that it's a, D minor harmonic 13th or whatever. So it's really just kind of trying to keep the idea flowing, of the overall vibe, and then getting it down on paper as quickly as I can. And this is just some paper that I had made up, it's a kind of short score style paper. So I've got a couple of things so I can write at the top, title reel, cue, clicks, anything, a time code line, and then it's basically woodwinds, brass, percussion, keys, and strings. But I just kind of use it for everything because I've got boxes of it. So it's, and that's actually, you just need to design it using Sibelius or whatever, and make a PDF and then take it to a printer and they'll make you pads. It's actually not very expensive, and you can get something really absolutely tailored to the exact, kind of thing that you like. So got it all down on a page. And then you can see here I've started to mess around with the organization of it. So I've got, right, I like that as an opening. Then I wanted to jump to here. So I ended up on that chord here. And then, so kind of going back to that chord. And then you go into a new section here. And then when I got to the end of here, and I end up at this big chord at the top, it kind of sounded like I looked at all my bits and pieces and fragments, and I thought, actually, it sounds quite nice to then going back down to here. That's quite a nice change there. So it's kind of written, my enharmonics are all over the place because I just writing it down as easily and as quickly as possible, but also so I can read it really easy as well. So I guess that's probably a G flat minor 6, if you can see what I'm playing there. Whereas I've written it in F sharp minor, but that's leading down from the A flat minor up here. So it does. So it's a kind of quite a nice chord change there, and then this runs on quite nicely to this bit here. So E minor going up to the G, and again that's my shorthand here. I've just written one big sharp sign next to all of them, and then it seemed a good follow-on to that section. And then this kind of flows through. There was an idea I had here, which... and then I thought it would be nice to keep that chord down and go... But in the final analysis, I was hearing that maybe as a distant choir, if the orchestra took over that and then you just had the sopranos and altos up here. But in the final analysis, it kind of seemed a bit hokey when I'm doing just a kind of vocal only thing, to then suddenly add an extra 20 singers up at the top end. So I ended up just shortening that and binning that section. I'm kind of a bit sad about that because I quite liked that. I've always loved that this, or yeah, a kind of that kind of idea. There is a mass, I think it's by Kadai, Zoltan Kadai, where the legend goes that he was writing the final section of this one part of the work. He heard the air during the Second World War, I think it was. He heard the air raid sirens going, and that kind of made it in, to the trebles singing this kind of soft, distant sounding kind of, air raid thing at the end of the. I think I've got the right composer. Probably Google it when I finish this and find out it's totally wrong. But I love little ideas like that, and the idea of kind of real life intruding into your pieces. Anyway, that's total diversion. So that got canned, and then we have these kind of slow chords at the end where it kind of come down in this kind of jazzy, and I wanted each one to be like a revelation, a new kind of section in a different way each time, so it wasn't a consistent thing, and then your resolution at the end. So that's the overview. So I had that. So then I went to the sequencer and I basically played it in totally rubato, so no click at all. Just tried to kind of feel it and just allow the music to kind of breathe. So you get the idea. You can see that I've made a couple of small edits. So when I started putting the choir in, I realized that there were a couple of sections where I needed to just have a little bit of a pause where people would recover from the previous section and start the next section. So it's really just kind of a musical fermata, using lots of technical terms today that I vaguely know. And then there's one section which doesn't quite line up at the end here. So you can see here we've got our little air raid siren, which I ended up not using, and so therefore this note needed to be shorter. And so you can see here that the chords don't kind of line up with the piano part. Now, when I started playing it in, I left the piano in quietly so that I could hear what was going on, and I played in the first or a moving part of each section, and that was my first kind of locked in one part. I then went in and just moved the notes under so they lined up with my piano parts. So it's incredibly simple to do. So for example, let's say the opening phrase, for example. So we kind of zoom in and you can see what I've done is basically kind of lined up here, and then I've played it in with my fader moves. And then just literally moved. It's fractionals because I played it a couple of times just to make sure I'd nail the timing. So it's fractional moves just to line up the choir, because I wanted it to feel not absolutely dead on, that everybody's coming in an unnatural way together. But I thought, okay, so my piano is the conductor, if you like. And so everything should be almost on the playhead when you hit that piano chord, and then just allowing for, if stuff was close enough, I didn't move it. So you have a slightly natural human feel in there as well. So if we just solo that soprano. So you can hear what I'm doing there. I've lined it up. I've got a nice kind of feel to the playing, and in here you can see that I've got mod wheel and expression control going. I haven't used anything else. It's pretty much just those two controllers for the whole of this piece. And then I've swapped around. I've got my kind of humming choir set up here, and you can see that I've split the altos, tenors and basses into two sections because I've got quite a lot of kind of complex stuff going on in specific areas. So obviously, you know, it's a 4-part harmony, but the basses are not going to be singing up and, you know, F sharp, G above middle C is getting a little bit high for the basses. So I knew that this section was going to be, you know, just one tenor, two alto parts and a soprano part. So that sounds like this. If I leave the piano in first. Okay, so that's the first section. If we turn the piano off and you want to hear just the chorus on their own. Okay, so you can hear what's going on there. So let's just unsolo all this stuff. So this section here, where we get up to the kind of peak, the emotional high of this opening section, I opened up here into these kind of R's, and as you can see here, we've got you know, the kind of overall movement of the expression and kind of mod wheel is gradually going up to the top. If we look at the expression here. Yeah, you can see there's a little bit of riding, and then as we hit the top, and then I very quickly pulled it all down. So you fade back down through the dynamics. So just check this out. So on the piano solo, this part sounds like this. So I wanted to really leave the kind of the last chord. I wanted to hold it almost uncomfortably long before you finally hit it. And this is what I love, although I don't do it that often, don't do it often enough really, about writing without click, is you just don't have to worry about anything apart from what feels good. So let's check out the choir. So fading away really nicely at the end there. And this is the thing that I love about, as a kind of former chorister, I love the power and immediacy of the voice, that there's no medium of communication. There's no, and, you know, obviously an incredible violinist has such a wealth of expressivity in the way that they control their instrument. But for this, there's something about the fact that it's coming out of your body. You know, I remember singing the Allegro Miserere and being one of the trebles in the distant choir, and that kind of late at night in this kind of Gothic architecture and hearing music floating around. It's these things make kind of I guess indelible impressions on your musical psyche, or you are the kind of the assemblage of your experiences, I guess, in some ways. Anyway, bit of a diversion. So why don't we play down the whole piece, and I will let's just mute the piano there. So let's play down the whole piece, and I'll kind of hone in on things so that you can see as we play through the fader moves and what's kind of happening within the notes. So here we go. So there we go. So the only thing really that remains is to have a quick look at the mix page. And I'll just show you quickly what I'm doing here. So you'll see that there's almost nothing on, well, there is nothing on any of the individual tracks. I'm sending the whole choir to an aux here. I've put a little bit of TC Hall. That's going out of Logic and back in again for the TC6000. And then I'm sending everything out 3 and 4. That's going into Pro Tools so that I can record what I'm doing and the microphone at the same time. So there's nothing going on Pro Tools. So it's really just these 4 plugins, and I'll show you what each one is set to and what they're doing. So the Manly Massive Passive is just giving a little bit of shelf from kind of around about 4K upwards, and a tiny bit of 150, a little bit of a bottom end thing going on there. They're both shelf, so it's a kind of smiley face really. Then I've got the UAD Fairchild. This, again, is not really doing very much. I think at the very, very peak of the loud bit, the needles move a tiny bit, but not very much. It's really just because I like the sound of it. And I'm using it with a tiny bit of boost here. So it's just gain staging as well, a little bit. So it's just adding something that this plugin adds that I like the sound of. Here, the Precision K. I am using this. I'd never used this before actually, and I'm using it now because I saw Greg Wells using it in one of his Mix with the Masters walkthroughs. So thank you, Greg. And I still don't really know what it does, but I just set it exactly the same as he had it set and stuck it on to see what it sounded like, and it just adds a little bit of fairy dust. It's really interesting. It's it just brings everything a tiny bit closer and a little bit wider, and just sounds beautiful. So. I stuck that on. Again, it's not doing a huge amount. And then this one, the final UAD plugin, is just adding a tiny bit of top end. Again, it's just 1.5 dB of 15K. So not very much. So I'm going to turn all of these off, and then we'll play, and I'll turn them on mid-phrase so that you can hear each one as we go along and see what they do. So you can see not a huge amount going on, but each tiny little tweak adds up, and it's just a kind of mastering chain of sorts, I guess. It's just adding a little tiny bit of fairy dust to the whole thing, just to brighten it up a little bit as it's coming out of the final mix bus, and that's it. So I hope that was interesting. A bit of a look at just busking some ideas on the piano, stick them down on the paper. Move them around a bit to see how the jigsaw goes together, and then I literally just played it in, really kind of lots of rubato, really kind of, you know, as musically as I could into the sequence, so no click, and then just play the choir in on top of the piano demo, line everything up, and that's it really. So really nice way to write, just totally kind of separating yourself away from the grid. And any kind of structure of, I mean, the other thing is writing to the page allows you to do stuff that your fingers don't naturally fall into. So you can fumble around for a bit and try and find that elusive note that makes the chord special. And it's probably not something that you would go for, you know, in a kind of in an improvisational situation. But it enables you to kind of extract those nice ideas and capture them in this way, and then you're able to use them in the composition. So I like it. It's a fun way to work. So I hope that was interesting to watch. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Bye bye.